When my brother destroyed the one thing I ever built and laughed, he thought Dad's money would fix everything. He didn't know I had a number he'd never expected me to call to a man who owned more than just a bank. The smell of salt and diesel fuel usually calms me. It's the scent of freedom, of my one true accomplishment. My boat, the Serenity, wasn't a gift. It wasn't some trust fund toy. It was a wreck I bought with my own savings from working 2 jobs through college. I spent 2 years of my life restoring her, every weekend, every holiday, pouring my sweat and soul into her planks. My brother, Leo, never understood. "Why are you covered in sawdust?" he'd ask, stepping out of the new convertible Dad bought him for his 21st birthday. "Just ask Dad for a new one." He didn't get that building, it was the whole point. So when I got the call from the harbor master, my blood ran cold. There'd been an incident. I broke every speed limit getting down to the marina, my mind a frantic slideshow of horrors, a fire, a sinking, a storm surge. But what I found was somehow worse. The Serenity was listing hard against the pier, a grotesque, gaping hole torn in her starboard side. The beautiful mahogany transom I'd spent a month sanding and varnishing was splintered into 1,000 pieces. It looked like someone had taken a giant can opener to my dream. And standing there, on the dock, surrounded by a gaggle of his preppy friends, was Leo. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't remorseful. He had a small cut on his forehead, which one of his friends was dabbing at with a napkin, but otherwise he was fine. In fact, he was laughing, actually laughing. I walked toward him, my vision tunneling until he was the only thing I could see. The sounds of the gulls and the clanging halyards faded into a dull roar in my ears. "Leo," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "what did you do?" He turned to me, a smirk playing on his lips. "Whoops," he said, shrugging with theatrical helplessness. "Hit the channel marker a little too hard coming back in. Guess I had a bit too much fun." One of his friends snickered. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You took my boat without asking, and you wrecked it. You wrecked 2 years of my life." Leo's smirk widened into a grin. He clapped me on the shoulder, a dismissive, patronizing gesture that made my skin crawl. "Relax, bro," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's just wood and fiberglass. Dad will pay for it. He always does." And that was it, the snap. The years of watching him fail upwards, of seeing him skate by on Dad's money while I worked for every single thing I owned. It all coalesced into a single clarifying moment of cold fury. He thought this was a financial problem. He thought Dad's checkbook was the ultimate power in our family, the universal solvent for all his mistakes. He was about to learn that some things can't be bought, and some debts aren't paid with money. I looked at the wreckage of my boat, then back at his smug, entitled face. I didn't yell, I didn't scream, I just gave him a small, tight smile. Then I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over a contact he didn't even know I had. A name he would never, in a million years, expect me to call. Leo's laughter caught in his throat. He watched my thumb press the screen, his bravado wavering for the first time. "Who you calling, huh?" "Ghostbusters?" he jeered, trying to get a rise out of his friends, who were now watching me with nervous curiosity. I ignored him. The phone rang twice before a deep baritone voice answered, a voice that carried the weight of old money and absolute authority. "Robert Sterling." "Uncle Robert, it's me," I said, my voice steady and formal. Leo's face went blank. He didn't have an Uncle Robert, not one he knew anyway. Our father was an only child. This was a name from a part of the family tree that Dad had deliberately pruned from our lives. "Yes, sir. I'm down at the marina," I continued, my eyes locked on my brother. "There's been an incident involving Leo, and a significant piece of personal property." I paused, letting the words hang in the salt air. "No, sir, not family property. My property. The one I bought and restored myself with my own funds." Leo started to look pale. He crashed it, and he seems to be under the impression that father will simply handle the financial fallout. I felt you should be aware of the kind of liability and public embarrassment he's creating for the Sterling family name. I listened for a moment to the clipped, decisive instructions from the other end of the line, then said, "Yes, sir. I understand. Thank you." I hung up. The silence on the dock was absolute. Even the gulls seemed to be holding their breath. Leo's friends were slowly backing away, as if my phone call had been a grenade, and they were trying to get out of the blast radius. "Who was that?" Leo demanded, his voice a panicked whisper. "What did you do?" "I called the bank, Leo," I said calmly. "You just call him Dad." I called the man who owns the bank. Before he could process that, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Dad. I answered and was immediately met with a torrent of rage. "What did you do?" he roared. "Robert just called me. He's pulling your brother's tuition. He's freezing the auxiliary credit cards. You went over my head. You fix this, you hear me? You call him back and you fix this." I took a deep breath. "No, Dad," I said, and the sense of power in that one word was intoxicating. For the first time in his life, Leo is going to fix his own mess, and you're not going to help him. I ended the call, leaving my father sputtering into a deadline. Leo was staring at me, his face ashen, the smirk completely gone, replaced by a dawning horror. He finally understood. This wasn't about the boat anymore. I hadn't just called for a repair estimate. I had called in an airstrike on his entire way of life. Just then, We heard the rumble of a heavy engine. A massive, gleaming black flatbed tow truck turned into the marina's parking lot, its amber lights flashing silently. It bypassed the visitor parking and rolled with unnerving purpose right toward the spot where Leo had parked his convertible. The driver, a mountain of a man in a black polo shirt with a discreet Sterling Enterprises logo on the chest, hopped out with a clipboard. He didn't even glance at us. He just started attaching a winch cable to the front axle of Leo's car. "Hey! Hey!" Leo shouted, finally snapping out of his stupor and running toward the truck. "What are you doing?" "That's my car! You can't take my car!" The driver turned, his expression utterly bored. He looked down at his clipboard, then at Leo. "Name's Leo," he grunted. "Got a repossession order here, signed by Robert Sterling. Said something about your privileges being reviewed pending a full behavioral audit." Leo sputtered, looking from the impassive driver to his gleaming car, then back to me. "A behavioral audit? What the hell is a behavioral audit?" He made a desperate lunge for the driver's clipboard, but the man sidestepped him with the practiced ease of someone who deals with entitled meltdowns for a living. The winch whirred, and the convertible's back wheels lifted sickeningly off the pavement. It was real. This was happening. That's when Leo's panic curdled into pure venom, all of it directed at me. "You did this!" he screamed, his face turning a blotchy red. "Over a stupid boat! You couldn't just take the money. You had to ruin my life." "I didn't ruin your life, Leo," I said, my voice as cold and hard as an anchor chain. "You did. You took something that wasn't yours, you destroyed it, and you laughed. You thought Dad's money made you invincible. I just showed you who owns the money." Just then, my father's Mercedes screeched into the lot, parking haphazardly across two spots. He burst out of the car, his face a thundercloud. "What in God's name is going on here?" he bellowed, storming toward the tow truck. "That's my son's car. You have no right." The driver simply tapped the Sterling Enterprises logo on his polo. My father stopped dead. He knew that logo. He knew what it meant. His authority, which had always seemed so absolute to me, evaporated in an instant. He looked like a regional manager being audited by the CEO. His fury deflated, replaced by a desperate, pleading look he aimed at me. "Call him back," he begged, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Please, you've made your point. Call Robert and tell him to stop this." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't my mess to stop." Before he could argue, another vehicle arrived. This one didn't screech or rumble. It was a black sedan that glided to a silent stop behind the tow truck. The back door opened, and a woman in a perfectly tailored gray suit stepped out. She looked to be in her late 40s, with her hair pulled back in a severe bun and an expression that suggested she had never smiled in her life. She held a thin leather portfolio and moved with an unnerving, silent efficiency. She walked past me and my father as if we were lampposts, her entire focus landing on Leo, who flinched under her gaze. "Leo Sterling?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a shard of ice. Leo just nodded, dumbstruck. "I am Ms. Albright," she said, opening her portfolio. "I'm here to administer the preliminary stages of your behavioral audit, as ordered by Mr. Robert Sterling." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Effective immediately. Your university enrollment for the upcoming semester has been withdrawn. Your apartment lease is being terminated. All personal effects will be packed and placed in storage." Your apartment lease is being terminated. All personal effects will be packed and placed in storage. Leo's jaw was on the floor. My father looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "But where will I go?" Leo stammered. "What am I supposed to do?" Ms. Albright raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh, your new living arrangements and employment have already been sorted out," she said coolly. She reached back into the sedan and pulled out a duffel bag, which she dropped at Leo's feet with a dull thud. "You will be working full-time on the marina's maintenance crew." She then pulled out a pair of greasy navy blue overalls from the bag and held them out to him. "Your first assignment is repairing the damage to Pier 7. Your salary will be garnished until the full cost of repairs to the vessel known as the Serenity is paid in full. Your shift started 5 minutes ago." For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the pilings and the hum of the tow truck's engine. Leo stared at the greasy overalls as if Ms. Albright had handed him a live snake. The fabric was stiff and stained, a universe away from the designer labels that filled his closet. His face, which had cycled through amusement, panic, and rage, finally crumpled into utter disbelief. "You can't be serious," he whispered, his voice cracking. He looked at my father, his last line of defense. "Dad? Do something." My father took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture towards Ms. Albright. "Now, listen," he began, his voice strained. "This is a family matter. We can handle this ourselves. There's no need for all this." Ms. Albright didn't even turn her head. "With all due respect, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "your definition of handling it is precisely what necessitated this intervention. Your son is a liability. Robert is simply mitigating the damage." She then looked directly at Leo. "The harbor master, Mr. Henderson, is expecting you." "He has a list of your duties. I suggest you change. Your designer clothes are unsuitable for creosote application. That was the final blow. The fight went out of Leo completely. He looked from his convertible being secured on the flatbed to the cold, unyielding face of Miss Albright, to me, standing by the wreckage of my boat. He saw no escape. Slowly, numbly, he took the overalls. He shuffled toward the marina's public restroom, his expensive sneakers scuffing on the gritty asphalt. My father watched him go, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen him. He finally turned to me, his eyes filled not with anger anymore, but with a deep, hollow sadness. "Was it worth it?" he asked softly. "Ask me in a few months," I replied, and turned my back on him to finally assess the damage to the Serenity. The next few weeks were quiet. I started the repairs myself, just like I had the first time. I spent every evening and weekend at the marina, measuring, cutting, and fitting new planks, and every day I saw Leo. I saw him sweeping the docks, hauling trash bins, and scrubbing algae off hulls. He was clumsy at first, and I heard the other marina workers giving him hell, but he didn't quit. He got thinner, his skin tanned and weathered by the sun and wind. The entitled softness in his face was slowly being replaced by a weary hardness. One Saturday afternoon, about a month in, I was fitting the final piece of the transom. It was a tricky job, and my arms were aching. I heard footsteps on the dock and looked up to see Leo standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee from the little marina cafe. He wasn't wearing the overalls. It was his day off. He was just in jeans and a plain T-shirt. He looked exhausted. He held one of the cups out to me. I hesitated, then took it. We stood in silence for a minute, watching the sunlight dance on the water. "It looks good," he said, nodding toward the newly repaired hull. "Better than before." "I learned a few things the first time around," I said. He took a sip of his coffee. "I get my first paycheck next week," he said, not looking at me. "It's not much, but it's a start for this." He gestured vaguely at the boat. Then he finally met my eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time, it didn't sound like a line he was told to say. "I didn't get it. I saw you working on this thing all the time, covered in dirt, and I thought you were crazy. I never knew what it meant to build something." I looked from his calloused hands, so different from the manicured ones that had gripped the wheel of his convertible, to the beautiful, strong new hull of my boat. The anger I had held on to for so long had finally washed out with the tide. I hadn't just gotten revenge, I hadn't just protected my property. I had made one call he didn't expect, and it might just have saved him. "Well," I said, taking a long sip of the hot coffee, "you're learning now." "Hand me that wrench,"